The air was thick with despair as Clara moved through the remnants of what was once a vibrant city. It felt like the world had collapsed around her, leaving behind a wasteland soaked in shadows and echoes of a life she barely recognized. Buildings that had once reached for the sky now lay crumbled, their skeletal remains a testament to the chaos that had unfolded. The streets were littered with debris, the signs of a thriving civilization now replaced by the haunting silence of abandonment. Each step Clara took felt heavy, not only from the weight of her surroundings, but also from the burden of her heart. Clara was driven by a singular purpose: to find her daughter, Sophia, who had disappeared weeks before the world as they knew it ended. Memories of her laughter haunted her thoughts, bringing warmth to an otherwise cold existence. But as days turned into weeks, uncertainty gnawed at her soul. What had happened to Sophia? Was she safe? Clara had no answers, only the hope that, like fireflies in the night, she would illuminate the darkness surrounding her. As she navigated through the twisted wreckage of her past, Clara had to confront the terrifying notion that survival was not just about finding food or shelter. It was also about grappling with the emotional aftermath of loss, guilt, and fear. Every corner she turned was a reminder of the life she once led, filled with mundane routines and bright futures. Now, it was a stark landscape that tested her resolve. In the stillness, Clara often wondered if she was strong enough to face the challenges ahead. Was it worth everything she had lost? Could she ever be whole again? The streets echoed with distant sounds, a mixture of wind, through the broken glass, and the faint scuttling of small creatures searching for scraps of sustenance. Clara paused as she noticed a group of figures huddled around a flickering fire in what may have been a bus stop. The warmth of the flames cast a soft glow against their gaunt faces, and for a moment she felt a twinge of longing, an ache for the connection that human beings naturally craved. But could she trust them? In desperation, she had learned that trust was a luxury in the ruins of society. The memories of betrayal cut deep, leaving her wary of every new encounter. Yet she also understood that survival often hinged on alliances. Who could she rely on? She had an innate fear of vulnerability, but perhaps strength could be found in numbers, an idea that flitted through her mind like a distant dream. Could these strangers become comrades in her quest? The warmth of the fire beckoned, but so did the nagging voice of caution. The question loomed: how many had been lost in the pursuit of companionship only to be betrayed? With the sun dipping beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Clara made her decision. She steeled herself and approached the group cautiously, her heart racing. They looked up, their expressions a blend of curiosity and wariness. A man with a thick beard and piercing blue eyes regarded her. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone gruff yet not entirely hostile. Clara swallowed hard, the weight of her fears swirling within her. "I am looking for my daughter," she responded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Her name is Sophia. She's just a child." The mention of Sophia's name rolled off her tongue like a prayer, invoking both hope and despair. The man's eyes softened slightly, and she sensed a flicker of understanding, as if he knew pain intimately. After a moment, he nodded slowly, motioning for her to sit near the fire. "You're not the only one searching. We all have someone we're trying to protect." Clara felt a warmth blossom in her chest, a fragile thread of connection amidst the desolation. As they shared their stories under the canopy of a fading sky, Clara found herself drawn into their world, a tapestry woven with threads of loss and resilience. Each tale was a reminder that, while the apocalypse had torn their lives apart, it also tied them together in unexpected ways. Could shared suffering be the foundation for something greater? Was there strength in their unity that transcended their individual sorrows? In that moment, Clara realized that survival was not merely an act of enduring, but also an act of remembering, of preserving the stories of those they had lost. As night fell and stars flickered overhead, Clara quietly vowed to keep Sophia's memory alive, no matter how far she had to travel or how many challenges she would have to face. What defined a mother was not just the blood that connected them, but the love that burned fiercely within her, igniting the resolve to fight against every adversity. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, yet Clara understood that in the shared warmth of the fire, surrounded by strangers who felt like family for a moment, there was a glimmer of hope that might guide her way. The night deepened, and sleep was a distant whisper, but Clara felt a flicker of belief, igniting within her a belief that even amidst devastation, there was a chance for redemption, a chance to find Sophia, and perhaps rediscover herself in the process. As shadows played upon the ground, Clara closed her eyes, imagining Sophia's bright smile lighting the way through the darkness. Would the dawn reveal the hope she so desperately sought? Or would it bring new challenges to face? The answers were lost in the uncertainty of the future, but the flicker of determination within her heart promised that she would not stop searching. She could not afford to give up. The journey had truly begun. Morning broke with a soft light filtering through the debris-laden streets, casting silvery rays that danced across the broken glass and crumbling concrete. Clara awoke to the sounds of rustling leaves and distant call echoes of a world striving to survive against the odds. The fire from the night before had dwindled to embers, but the warmth of the shared stories had left a lingering glow in her spirit. She could still hear the voices of the others, their accounts of loss and perseverance weaving together to form a fragile tapestry of hope. As she rose to her feet, Clara caught sight of the group still sleeping nearby, their faces drawn and weary, yet adorned with an air of determination that had grown throughout their conversations. The man with the blue eyes, whose name she had learned was David, stirred first. He blinked against the morning light, and as their eyes met, Clara felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. They were united now by their shared purpose: survival. "What's the plan today?" Clara asked, her voice still thick with sleep yet filled with resolve. David stretched, cracking his back with an audible sound as he stood to survey their surroundings. "We need to find supplies and maybe some weapons," he replied, rubbing the stubble on his chin. "There are rumors of a nearby settlement. It might be a safer place to get what we need and gather information, including any news about missing children." There it was again, Sophia's name lingering in the air like a prayer. Clara felt a surge of adrenaline at the mention of the settlement. The thought of being closer to a community sparked something in her. What if they had seen her daughter? What if they could help? She quickly gathered her meager belongings: a tattered backpack with a few cans of food, a bottle of water, and a well-loved photo of Sophia tucked away like a secret treasured beneath her heart. As the group began to stir, Clara glanced at them with a blend of trepidation and hope. They were strangers, and yet, with each shared burden, they were becoming something more a makeshift family forged in the fires of adversity. David took the lead, motioning for everyone to gather closer. He mapped out their route with a stick he found nearby, tracing lines in the dirt as if trying to bring structure to the chaos surrounding them. "I don't know what we'll find there," he cautioned, "but we need to be smart about it. We'll move quietly and stay aware of our surroundings. Trust your instincts." Clara nodded, her heart pounding, anxious about what lay ahead. The journey began with a quiet intensity. They traversed through the remnants of the city, each step echoing with the memories of lives once lived. Clara noticed the once vibrant murals faded and chipped, depicting stories of joy and community that now lay helpless beneath layers of dust and decay. Would she ever be able to return to a world that had meaning? Or had that world disappeared forever? As they moved through the desolation, Clara's mind drifted to Sophia. What was she doing right now? Was she scared? The imagination of her daughter alone in a world like this struck a nerve deep within Clara's chest. It was a blend of pain and fuel, an ache that propelled her forward with every inhalation. How could she endure this uncertainty? She had to believe that Sophia was still out there, somewhere waiting for her to come. In the thick of their travels, muffled sounds caught Clara's attention: footsteps, laughter, the sharp crack of a twig breaking underfoot. Instinctively, she pressed closer to the group, their pace slowing as they neared an open clearing that was foreign, surreal. Low stone walls marked what once might have been a bustling marketplace, now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers that defiantly broke through the concrete. Could this be the settlement David spoke of? A final refuge amidst the ruins? The atmosphere felt charged, a current of energy surging through the air, whispering to them in hopes of connection and safety. Yet, as they approached, Clara felt the tension rise, each heartbeat echoing her trepidation. What awaited them on the other side of that clearing? As they stepped into the clearing, they were met by a handful of wary figures, thin and sharp-featured, their eyes scanning the newcomers with suspicion. Clara held her breath, her heart racing as unsure glances passed among the group. How best to approach? How to communicate their intent without triggering hostility? David took a step forward, his arms raised slightly in a gesture of peace. "We come in search of supplies and safety. We mean no harm," he proclaimed, his voice steady yet edged with urgency. Clara felt a flicker of admiration for him and wondered if she had the same courage inside her. One of the figures, a woman with a scar running across her cheek and a guarded stance, stepped forward, her brow knitted in concentration. "Supplies are scarce," she said with a gravelly voice, "and trust is earned, not given lightly." Her assessment cut through the air, heavy with the weight of their existence. Clara felt the air thicken with uncertainty. Would they be turned away? The thought was unbearable. There were so many questions swirling through her mind. and desperation coiled tightly in her gut. What if this was another closed door? What if this was another instance of being forced to fend for herself? Please, Clara found her voice, stepping beside David. I'm searching for my daughter, and I believe you might know something. Anything that can help. The vulnerability in her plea hung in the air, raw and unguarded, yet filled with the power of a mother's love and determination. The woman's expression softened slightly at Clara's words, uncertainty crossing her features. We may have heard of a girl fitting that description, she conceded slowly, the tension crackling like electricity. But we need something in return, a show of good faith. What would they demand? Clara's mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. What sacrifices would she have to make, and were they worth the risk of finding her daughter? Anything, Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to engulf her. In that moment, Clara was struck by the gravity of their situation. Would she gamble everything, her trust, her hope on the word of strangers in a world so perilous? But as she stood there, staring into the eyes of the woman before her, Clara realized that sometimes, even the smallest flicker of vulnerability could ignite the strongest flame of connection. Would this be the beginning of a new path toward finding Sophia, or was it just another misleading turn in an already treacherous journey? While shadows loomed on the horizon of uncertainty, Clara steeled herself. Hope was a light that could guide them through the darkness. With her heart pounding and her spirit unwavering, she took a step closer, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to bridge the gap between desperation and survival. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily upon Clara's shoulders as the woman scrutinized her with cautious eyes, weighing the sincerity of her plea. Clara's mind raced, spiraling through potential negotiations and the risks involved with people whose motives were still shrouded in mystery. What were they willing to do for one small promise? Her heart beat in a rhythm that echoed her desperation, pushing her to maintain composure despite the tempest brewing inside her. I'm willing to help, Clara insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. Just tell me what you need. This could be the key to finding her. But before they could decide how to proceed, they heard footsteps approaching, the sound echoing through the room. Quick, let's get out, David hissed, pulling Clara back into the hallway. Adrenaline kicked in, and they moved carefully, every moment feeling like a race against time. As they exited the warehouse, Clara knew they couldn't stay there long. Having found news about her daughter and the undeniable need to escape, she felt more determined than ever. At the same time, she knew that the faction now had eyes on them, and every move would have to be precise and strategic. If they wanted to uncover everything, they still needed to gain the trust of the leader in the faction. But one thing was certain. The search for Sophia was now more than a personal mission. It was a fight against a system that threatened not only her daughter, but every lost and unjustly treated child in this new world. Clara was willing to fight with every ounce of strength she had, and from that moment on, time would be both her greatest ally and her fiercest enemy. Let's meet up with the others, David suggested as they stepped into the daylight. Clara felt a wave of hope. The battle was just beginning, and she stood firm, determined not to back down. Panic surged within Clara as the figures turned, fanning out towards them like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. What do we do? Clara breathed, her pulse pounding in her ears. Fear clawed at her throat, but somewhere deep inside, she felt a familiar spark of flicker of defiance igniting in her chest. Run! David yelled, and in an instant, Clara and Maya were already bolting through the debris, zigzagging to avoid being cornered. The sounds of footsteps echoed behind them, hot on their trail, sending adrenaline coursing through Clara's veins. With no time to think, Clara sprinted, her long strides carrying her further from danger as the abandoned structures shifted around her. She could sense David and Maya beside her, the trio fueled by desperation and the instinct to survive. In those frenzied moments, everything blurred: the cracked pavement beneath her feet, the cries that faded into the distance, and the reality of what they faced. It was no longer just about finding Sophia, it was about life and death. Fear pushed them forward, but hope flickered, illuminating a path even in chaos. As they finally reached the street, Clara cast a hasty glance back. The figures lingered, confusion etching their faces as they hesitated at the edge of the factory. Clara's heart surged with both terror and relief. They had escaped. Move fast, Maya urged, her voice steady, leading them toward an alleyway that would provide cover. The adrenaline still coursing through Clara's veins felt electric. They needed to regroup, to think. When they were finally in the shelter of the alley, panting from exertion, Clara leaned against the cold, damp wall and closed her eyes for a moment to steady her breathing. The gravity of their narrow escape crashed down on her. What just happened? she gasped, still shaken. "We got lucky," David said, his expression serious, "but we need to be more careful. This world isn't just about surviving, it's about watching your back." Clara nodded, absorbing the harsh reality of his words. She had begun to understand that every interaction, every step taken, could lead her closer to her daughter or deeper into danger. What would she do next? How could she proceed with so many uncertainties looming ahead? Maya's hand rested on Clara's arm, grounding her back to the present. "We regroup. We tell the others what we saw and prepare. We need a plan." Clara felt a flicker of determination reignite within her. Even when despair threatened to take hold, the possibility of finding Sophia and the shared bond with her newfound companions illuminated a path forward. It filled her with resolve to keep moving, to keep hoping, even in the face of chaos. In that moment, as they caught their breath in the dim alley, Clara realized that survival, at its core, was not just about escaping dangers. It was also about cherishing the bonds formed in the twilight of despair. With each hurdle they faced, they were becoming stronger, not just as individuals, but as a family forged by shared purpose. And as the day wore on, Clara vowed to keep fighting, propelled by the love in her heart that would lead her, not only to Sophia, but to the very essence of humanity that lay beyond the darkness. What awaited them might be unknown, but it was the journey toward hope that truly mattered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that danced across the city's remnants, Clara's thoughts raced like the darkening sky. They regrouped in a dilapidated shelter, a former workshop anointed by the elements and vagaries of time. Clara leaned against a cold, rusting table, heart hammering from both exertion and the overwhelming weight of their next steps. The group Clara, David, Maya, and Jana saw in a tight circle, their expressions solemn yet resolute. Clara felt the urgency of their mission settle heavily, and she took a deep breath, summoning the courage to speak. "We need to gather more information about that group we saw," Clara began, her voice steady despite the anxiety prickling at the edges of her mind. "We can't risk running into them again unprepared. If they're a threat, we need to know their numbers, their motives." "Agreed," David interjected, his blue eyes scanning each person in the group as if seeking their buy-in. "But we also need to focus on getting supplies. There are other people depending on us now, and we can't keep going without food or better protection." Jonas, who had remained quiet until now, nodded slowly. This could be the key to finding her. But before they could decide how to proceed, they heard footsteps approaching, the sound echoing through the room. "Quick, let's get out," David hissed, pulling Clara back into the hallway. Adrenaline kicked in, and they moved carefully, every moment feeling like a race against time. As they exited the warehouse, Clara knew they couldn't stay there long. Having found news about her daughter and the undeniable need to escape, she felt more determined than ever. At the same time, she knew that the faction now had eyes on them, and every move would have to be precise and strategic. If they wanted to uncover everything, they still needed to gain the trust of the leader in the faction. But one thing was certain: the search for Sophia was now more than a personal mission. It was a fight against a system that threatened not only her daughter, but every lost and unjustly treated child in this new world. Clara was willing to fight with every ounce of strength she had, and from that moment on, time would be both her greatest ally and her fiercest enemy. "Let's meet up with the others," David suggested as they stepped into the daylight. Clara felt a wave of hope. The battle was just beginning, and she stood firm, determined not to back down. The noise echoed ominously, drawing the attention of the scavengers who turned toward the sound, loading their weapons and moving cautiously as they investigated. Clara's heart raced, and she could feel the gravity of their decision weighing heavily as they hid, waiting in anxious silence, holding their breath as the figures grew closer. "Keep low," David urged, his eyes locked on the approaching group. As one of the figures broke away from the crowd, Clara leaned closer to David. "Now," she murmured, and they slipped out from their cover, stealthily moving to a concealed position behind rusted machinery. The lone figure, a man wearing a patched vest and clutching a weapon with a raw grip, approached the direction of the noise, his posture wary yet intrigued. Clara held her breath, mind racing with the consequences of their plan. "Hey!" David called out, his voice pushing through the stillness with calculated confidence. The man halted, muscles tensing at the unfamiliar sound coming from behind him. "Who's there?" he shouted, turning slightly to get a better view of the shadows. Clara watched, her heart pounding, watching the glint of metal in his hand, and knowing they had to act fast. "Just a lost soul," David replied, his tone laced with a deceptive calm. "No harm intended." We're just scavengers like you. Scavengers? The man's brow furrowed in suspicion as he took a step closer. What are you after? Looking for supplies, trying to make our way, Clara said, her voice steady despite the rising fear inside her. She stepped forward slightly, leaving behind the safety of their hiding spot, her expression open and honest, aware they were toying with fate. What's your name? He demanded, still scanning the perimeter as if expecting an ambush. Clara, she replied, forcing a convincing smile, hoping her openness might ease the tension. Just Clara, looking to survive. The man eyed her cautiously, but didn't appear to fully trust them yet. Survival ain't so simple anymore. You lost then? You don't seem like you belong around here. We are, David interjected, and it's not just about us. We've seen families scattered everywhere, kids lost. We've got to stick together if we don't want to end like the others. The man regarded them carefully, a flicker of understanding passing through his guarded demeanor. There's a lot of danger in these parts, he said grudgingly. What do you know about the faction that was working out of here? Clara's heart raced with questions, sensing this was the opportunity they had sought. We saw some people earlier. They looked organized. How might they be using this territory? The man hesitated, weighing his words, then glanced back toward the entrance where his companions lingered. They keep things tight around here, he finally said, his voice lowering. They're not just looking out for themselves, they've got their hands in everything. Rumors of child trafficking, people disappearing entirely. If you're looking for kids, Clara's breath caught in her throat, a cold chill spreading through her. That's what we're looking for, she said, stepping closer, her desperation spilling forth. Families are missing children, I have to find mine. His gaze sharpened. I can't help you directly. You need to tread lightly around here. But if you're brave enough to stick it out, they may let you in. Gain trust or prove you can be of use. Just know whoever runs this place has eyes everywhere. Thank you, Clara breathed, relief flooding her. But even as they exchanged words with the stranger, her mind was already layering the implications, imagining the paths that now lay ahead. As the man began to retreat back towards his group, Clara considered their next steps. They had gained information, but at what cost? Trust was a rare currency in this world, and every interaction felt like a thread strung tighter and tighter, fragile and ready to snap. Let's go back to Maya and Jonas, David urged, and together they retraced their steps, the gravity of the newfound intel settling in their minds. That night, as they regrouped in the shelter once more, Clara shared everything they had learned with Maya and Jonas. In the dim light of a flickering candle, the stakes had never felt higher. If they're really part of something bigger, something like child trafficking as the guy suggested, we need to act fast. We can't wait for them to move first, Clara insisted, her voice steady despite the dangerous territory they were treading into. We will need to plan, Maya replied, steely determination in her demeanor. But rushing in headfirst won't help anyone. We need to gather more intel, maybe even try to infiltrate. David interjected. If there's a network behind this faction, we might be able to find weakening points. We can leverage information, make friends among their ranks, see where it leads. They each looked at one another, faces illuminated by determination and fear alike. Clara felt a collective resolve taking shape, a bond forged in urgency. Each decision hinged upon perfect timing and careful planning. And in that moment, Clara swore to herself that she would find Sophia, not just because she was her daughter, but because every child deserved the chance to be more than a statistic in this monstrous new world. Hope pushed her forward, and the fire of determination burned brightly in her soul. As they finished their planning, Clara looked out into the darkened streets, feeling both the weight of despair and the flicker of hope grow within her. They had a dangerous path, but one that offered a chance of reclaiming their lives. With Sophia in her heart and the spirit of her newfound family bolstered around her, Clara understood that every step forward was a step toward reclaiming what had been lost. And as dawn approached, promising new beginnings, Clara felt her resolve solidify. She was ready to fight for a future where darkness would not extinguish hope. Okay, GPT, -40 Mini. Glad you're still following along. If you have any specific questions, thoughts on the story, or if you're looking for something else entirely, feel free to share. The sun emerged timidly on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Clara woke up before the others, her thoughts buzzing with the plan that had formed the night before. The light of a new day brought a thread of hope, but also a heavy sense of responsibility. Knowing that every action could have a massive impact on her search for Sophia made her anxious. Clara walked around the small workshop where they were sheltered, observing the faces of her companions as they slept. Maya was curled up against the wall, and David had his head resting on a block of wood. Jonas appeared to be alert, even while resting. A feeling of gratitude washed over her. This group had become her new family in a world that felt like it was falling apart. When she finally decided it was time to wake the others, Clara grabbed a can of soup they had found and heated on the makeshift fire they had built the night before. The subtle aroma began to fill the space, eventually stirring the first murmurs of protest. "That's an invitation for everyone to join us," Clara whispered, amused, as she watched sleepy faces contort. David was the first to sit up, rubbing his eyes as if trying to dissolve the haze of sleep. "What are we having for breakfast?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Surviving, as always," Clara replied, a smile forming on her lips. "We've got some soup." Maya stretched and looked around, realizing the commotion. "Is it morning already? We've got work to do." After everyone had eaten, Clara proposed discussing their plan. The group huddled around the metal table, where the traces of their nighttime planning were still visible. "Today, we need to infiltrate the faction we discovered. We need information about the disappearances and how this network operates," Clara began, feeling urgency building within her. "The man we met said they have eyes everywhere. We need to be cautious." Maya nodded, looking directly at Clara. "We can pass ourselves off as desperate for supplies. If they're interested in recruiting people, maybe they'll see us as useful." "That sounds risky," Jonas warned, his expression serious. "If they realize we're here to investigate, they could expel us, or worse, hurt us. We have to take that risk," Clara replied, her fervor increasing. "We can't let fear hold us back. We need to find out what's happening to the children and how we can help." With the plan in mind, the group prepared themselves. They deliberately chose clothes that made them appear more vulnerable and less threatening. Torn, dirty outfits, as if they were simple survivors trying to escape a cruel reality. Clara felt a mix of nervousness and determination as she looked in a cracked mirror, her eyes reflecting a version of herself willing to do whatever it took. As they walked toward the old warehouse where the faction seemed to operate, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were venturing into unknown territory, where every step could invite danger. But the image of Sophia kept her focused. When they finally arrived at the location, the atmosphere was tense. Clara could sense the vibrant energy in the air, a feeling that they were about to step into something much bigger than they could have imagined. Lines of people waited at the warehouse entrance, all looking anxious, some whispering among themselves. Clara and the others blended into the crowd, trying to appear as ordinary as possible. "Let's wait for an opening," David suggested, keeping his eyes on a man who appeared to be the faction's leader, discussing something loudly with a group of people. "We're in luck. It looks like a meeting is about to start," Clara murmured, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. As they moved closer, she could see the man standing out. He had a charismatic yet intimidating demeanor, his voice echoing with power and control. "Welcome everyone," the man began. "We are not only here to find people who want to join us, but also to discuss the new security measures we need to implement. This is vital for our survival and, more importantly, to keep our community united." Clara exchanged a meaningful glance with the others. Whatever this community was, it was a mix of hope and fear, and what she wanted most was to know how much of it involved the missing children. The meeting continued, and they listened intently as the man spoke about the necessity of protecting what had been built. "Resources are dwindling, and infiltrators are among us," he said, his voice heavy with resentment. After a while, Clara realized an opportunity was forming when the man began asking attendees about their skills and how they could contribute. "We need skilled people capable of gathering information and protecting our territory. This is our chance," Clara said quietly. "If we manage to join, we might discover where the children are and what kind of power this faction actually holds." Maya and David nodded, while Jonas kept a worried look on his face. Before they could think twice, Clara took a deep breath and raised her hand, her heart racing as she said, "I'm willing to help. I know how to scout for supplies and find new sources of food." A sudden silence fell over the room, and all eyes turned to Clara. The man surprisingly locked eyes with her, scrutinizing her. "You and your friends here?" He directed his attention to David and the others. "Do you have experience?" "We have what it takes," David replied, his tone firm. "We're willing to do what's necessary." The man smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Very well then, I will check your skills. We'll decide if you are worthy of being part of our group." Clara felt a brief wave of relief. They had been accepted, but it was clear that the real test was yet to come. The man continued to speak, and Clara focused to memorize every word, every movement, knowing this could be the key to finding Sophia. As the meeting progressed, Clara and the others were assigned to assist with various tasks. Each job felt more like a test than a contribution. When she was sent to help organize supplies, Clara kept her eyes open. The curiosity was palpable, and she was determined to discover whatever she could. As they started to work, Clara noticed a door at the back of the warehouse, slightly ajar. A sudden impulse urged her to explore. Hoping no one would notice, she gestured for David to follow her, both moving cautiously toward the entrance. When Clara pushed the door open, a musty odor filled her nostrils, and what she found inside took her breath away. A room full of crates, but not just supplies. There were documents, blueprints, and maps, and on a table in the corner, a folder labeled Operation Child. With a furtive glance, Clara opened the folder, and her heart raced. Inside was a list of names of missing children, descriptions, and coordinates. Urgency surged within her. This could be her chance to figure out where Sophia had been taken. "Clara, what did you find?" David whispered. Concern etched on his face. "We need to take this," Clara said, adrenaline coursing through her veins. This could be the key to finding her. But before they could decide how to proceed, they heard footsteps approaching, the sound echoing through the room. "Quick, let's get out," David hissed, pulling Clara back into the hallway. Adrenaline kicked in, and they moved carefully, every moment feeling like a race against time. As they exited the warehouse, Clara knew they couldn't stay there long. Having found news about her daughter and the undeniable need to escape, she felt more determined than ever. At the same time, she knew that the faction now had eyes on them, and every move would have to be precise and strategic. If they wanted to uncover everything, they still needed to gain the trust of the leader in the faction. But one thing was certain: the search for Sophia was now more than a personal mission. It was a fight against a system that threatened not only her daughter, but every lost and unjustly treated child in this new world. Clara was willing to fight with every ounce of strength she had, and from that moment on, time would be both her greatest ally and her fiercest enemy. "Let's meet up with the others," David suggested as they stepped into the daylight. Clara felt a wave of hope. The battle was just beginning, and she stood firm, determined not to back down.